Thanks, Chris, for starting the recording. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Before I move on with the items on the agenda, I would like to just review the meeting norms, and these meeting norms apply to everyone, board members, community members, administrators, everybody. So please keep them in mind. Number one is keep the best interest of the school and children in mind while balancing the needs of the taxpayers. Number two, make decisions based on clear information. Number three, honor the board's decisions. Number four, keep meetings short and on time. Number five, stick to the agenda. Number six, keep remarks short and to the point. Number seven, everyone gets a chance to talk before people take a second turn. And number eight, respect others and their ideas. So the other thing that I usually go over at this point is how community or public comment happens. And so I'm also going to go over that right now. It may be a little bit different for the simple fact that we're also having a listening session under 5.4. So for items that are not on the agenda, if you'd like to speak to those items, you should put your name, the town or the city that you live in, and then the item number that you'd like to speak under. If you have, if it's for an item that's not on the agenda, then I would recommend or ask that you please sign up for 3.1, which is public comment, or if you're a student, 3.2 for student voice. If you have signed up to give a comment for an item on the agenda, other than the listening session, then you get 2 minutes to talk and give your feedback and give your public comment. If you would like to speak in the listening session, that's going to be a little bit different than these other items on the agenda. You will get 5 minutes. I still would think it would be helpful to have people sign up. If you are here now and you're hearing that, I'm going to relax the rules a little, understanding that people may be coming in late, knowing that we are going to start the listening session in a little bit. So we will honor raised hands and late signups and that sort of thing for the listening session regarding the surplus funds. So that's only applies to the 5.4. So with that being said, we will move on. Hey, Abby, thanks for joining us. We'll move on to additions or deletions with a motion to approve the agenda, which is item number 2. So the first thing I would do is look for a motion to approve the agenda. Sarah, is that a first? And Alice a second? Thank you so much. Are there any additions or deletions? Okay, hearing none. Then I would ask for all those in favor of approving the agenda as it is presented to please signify with a thumbs up. Guy is a yes. Yes. Alice, yes. Sarah, yes. Renee, I've lost you. Yes. Thank you. Gina, yes. Chris, yes. Abby, yes. Okay. So the agenda is approved. Thank you so much. Now we're at item number 3, 3.1 public comment. And I got to pull up my chat to see if anybody would like to speak under public comment. Josh, I think Josh Howard would like to speak. It says 5.1, but I think that was a typo because he put public comment. And it also looks like Carrie Martell would like to speak. Oh, I'm sorry. Kristen Morrison would like to speak under public comment and Carrie Martell would like to speak under public comment. So I'm going to just set my timer. Everybody gets 2 minutes and I would ask that you try to be as respectful to keep to that 2 minutes as we have a lot to do. So Josh Howard, you're first.
Yeah, just a couple questions for you, Chris. Back to the seatbelt issue on the buses. Just wondering if anything's come from that since the last time we spoke. And the second thing is the bus driver shortage. I was wondering if there's any movement as far as trying to get volunteers as already school staff to maybe be backup drivers, administrators, anyone else that's already hired in district to volunteer in to, get bus driver pay in the morning, but be able to do something like that because For the last few days here, we haven't had a bus, and I got to tell you, drop off and pick up in Berrytown is just horrible. It takes forever, and the line is ridiculous, and we also got to figure out something better. And I figure if you already got people already passed background checks and they want to earn a couple extra bucks, that might be a way to look at it.
Okay, thanks, Josh. Next is Kristen Morrison.
Hi, thanks everyone. I just wanted to speak to the recent COVID issue and the amount of times my family's been affected with the close contacts. We've had 6 of them. Yes, 6 between 2 children. And I want to keep it on the positive side and thank Chris and Jen and my girls' teachers for all the support and respectful conversations as we've navigated this. And just moving forward, I just wanted to come on here tonight and really just make sure the board knows just how many times one family has been hit by this, to highlight the need to continue to move forward with things like the Test to Stay program, because it really is needed. Kids have to stay in school, parents have to stay working. It has affected us big time. So thank you.
Sure. I didn't want to interrupt you, but there is a COVID update in under 6.1. So I would encourage you to stay if you're able to, because there will be more conversation about, I'm sure, where we are, where we're heading. But I appreciate your comment. Carrie Martell would also like to speak for public comment. Carrie?
Yes, good evening. I'm a paraeducator at Berrytown, and I also want to just thank everybody who comes in every day and pushes through. And we don't, always know what the next day is going to provide. But as a staff member, having my daughter be out 3 times now, I've almost exhausted all of my sick time, because I've only been in the district for, I think, 3 years now. So that's a concern for me, having to use up my time. But also I'm looking at 4th grade class has 1 kid in there. Everybody's quarantining. I'm looking at other teachers that don't have any. Like, it's very alarming. And I'm wondering that, although even as a parent, if I didn't work in the district, knowing that it's not easy to go remote or shut down, that while my daughter was out, I don't feel that she, because she was absent, quarantining, was learning what she could have been under other circumstances, as being in school. And was just wanting to bring up the suggestion of maybe a planned 2-week closure for cleaning, and to have the unvaccinated tested before coming back. Because I'm looking at November, December, that this time last year, people were traveling, maybe not being honest about it, or didn't seem to consider that maybe that would have been an issue. And the case, I'm just I guess just worried about what next month and the month after holds for students, for parents, for staffing, etc.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you very much.
I would encourage you, if you're able to stay, we will talk more about the COVID update. I appreciate your comments. And I appreciate that you you thanked everybody. We do appreciate the staff who are coming in, and we do recognize the position that all of our parents are in.
Absolutely.
Marcy Kreitz couldn't figure out how to add a public comment. So Marcy, we're going to talk about COVID under 6.1. So I will, even though the last 2 people commented on COVID, I would recommend that if you're able to stay under 6.1, we will be talking about COVID, and I can put your name down to give your comment at that time, if that works. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So now we will move on. It doesn't look like there's anybody else for public comment. So, and I don't think there's anyone that has signed up for student voice. Are there any students that would like to participate who have not signed up? Okay. Hearing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. And the consent agenda has one item, which is the meeting minutes from September 23rd. I look for a motion to approve those minutes under the consent agenda. Someone like to make that motion? Sorry, Guy?
Yeah,
Second.
so moved.
And Gina, second? Okay. Any questions or comments? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify with a thumbs up. Guy? Yes. Tim? Yes. Alice? Yes. Sarah? Yes. Renee? Yes. Gina? Yes. Chris? Yes. Abby? Yes. Okay. The agenda, the meeting minutes are approved, and we will move on to new hires. 5.1. Chris, would you like to go over the new hires in our packet?
Yep, thank you, Sonia. In your original board packet, you had one new hire, and then in yesterday's addendum, you had another. I will lead off with the first one. This candidate's name is Kimberlyn Gilbert. You guys may recognize that last name. Kimberlyn is the daughter of our own Tina Gilbert. She is a well-known person in Berry City and Berrytown schools. We are so thrilled to have her join us. To start, Kimberlyn is going to be joining Berry City as a literacy interventionist, which has been an unfilled position. This is funded through the ESSER grant. In January, Kimberlyn is going to be filling in on the Berry City second grade team as a long-term substitute for maternity leave. So she is going to be doing double duty for us, but we're very, very happy to have her on board. The second person that we're bringing forward is Karen Harker. And Karen most recently has been a permanent substitute at Spalding High School, and she is going to be joining us in a new role that is going to be split between two spots. One is as a 0.25 English language learner teacher at Spalding, and a 0.75 interventionist. The 0.25 English language position, English language learner position, is something that is new for us. That is a position that had been phased out in the last few years, but we have had increased numbers of families moving to the district who need English language services, some at the high school. So we wanted to reinstate that position. How that 0.25 is going to be funded is through an unfilled ELA position in the high school. We had a resignation this summer in the English department that we decided we did not need to fill. So the funding is going to come from that with this new need that came about. That is something that does happen occasionally when we have families move in. And we need to meet those services. The 0.75 literacy interventionist position at the high school is an unfilled position that too will be funded through the ESSER grant. So we're really happy to have Karen on board. She's most recently moved up to the Berry community from North Carolina, has a really long history as an educator, very interesting background. We're really happy to have her on board.
Thanks, Chris. Before we move forward, Josh Howard, would you mind muting yourself? We're just getting a little bit of, thank you so much. Okay, so I would look for a motion to approve the two candidates that have been presented. Andrea?
I was just looking for some clarification. The hire sheet did not indicate, Kimberly Gilbert, if this was a literacy interventionist or math interventionist, or is there a specific area that she's an interventionist for?
Forgive me, I believe it is a math interventionist at Berry City for K4. So she'll be working at the elementary level as a math interventionist. And
Thank you, Andrea.
that is an unfilled position. That has been an unfilled position, Andrea.
Okay, I think it's a K5. According to the hire sheet, I believe it's K5.
Okay.
It says PK through 5, actually.
PK through 5.
It wouldn't be pre-K, so this might be an error on the hire sheet that we can fix.
Okay,
I
so
believe it's K4, Andrea.
K4. Okay.
So I would look for a motion to approve these two candidates, and if there are questions, I can entertain those after we have a motion on the table.
So moved, Guy.
Thanks, Guy. In a second. Gina is a second. All right. Are there questions? No questions? Chris Parker. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Sonia. So one question I had about Kimberly's was, I don't see on the hire sheet that it says that she will be a long-term sub after January. And I also am wondering how this happens with, so it says ESSER until January 1st, then move to elementary general ed. So is she then just doing the maternity leave and then she will not be working for the district anymore? Or what is if she's going to be working for the district, what is the position after that and how is it to be funded?
Right. So the maternity leave is going to be for the entire second half of the school year, for one. Following that, remember, any new hires, Chris, would need to reapply for any position that would be open. So she might be reapplying for that interventionist position for next year because she's been hired after August 1st. In addition, she might apply for any open teaching positions that come up this winter. So winter or spring. So this is just for for this year. For the long-term sub is for whenever that person goes out for maternity leave in January until the end of the year.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Sometimes I think just how things are recorded on the hire sheets are confusing. And, you know, when we have all the ESSER money coming in and that's obviously short-term and grant funded. And so, you know, budget-wise, we just want to make sure that things aren't getting folded in and just then counted as an FTE going forward into other years.
Yeah, and that isn't the intention. And I don't disagree with you about the nature of those forms, to be honest. And it's also both of these positions happen to be split positions, which can also be confusing. The reality is that we have multiple roles that are not filled right now, and we're trying to piece things together as best we can with the most qualified people we can get. And in this case, we are very fortunate to get both of these people to fill these multiple roles.
So, Chris, are you all set? Okay. Are there any other questions? Sarah, go ahead.
This isn't really a question. It's more to answer something that Chris had asked. We did ask Lisa in the business office they have to for grant purposes, but they're keeping a list and keep a track of everybody who's been hired under ESSER funds. And I've told Lisa that at the finance committee, we're going to want to review that as we set budget. So.
Good. Thank you for that point. Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right. Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the hiring of these two candidates, please signify with a thumbs up. Guy, yes. Tim, yes. Alice, yes. Sarah, yes. Renee, yes. Gina, yes. Chris, yes. Abby, yes. Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much, and welcome to the district for those two. Next is resign, retire, and I don't think we have anything under this item, so we will just move along. 5.3 is review draft of official screening committee charge, and you have something in your packet, the superintendent candidate screening committee charge, and I hope you've had a chance to review it. I'm wondering if is Carol on here?
I am here.
Hi, Carol. There's a lot of squares today. Do we need to approve this? It doesn't say action. Do we just need to review it or do we need to approve it?
You just need to adopt it. So
Okay.
on the second page, there's adopted by the board.
Okay. And so we do need to take action on it?
You do. And these committee members, as with all committees, they may change a little bit in here depending, what it looks like when we put the team together.
Okay.
But yeah, we just need to have you adopt this charge, please.
Okay. So is there, because it doesn't say action, I'm a little hesitant to do it, but I also know that we are looking at, we don't want to drag this out because we want to get the process started. So does anybody have any, if we don't adopt it, but we are, can you move forward if we don't adopt it? Or do we have to adopt it before you can move forward?
Well, I can move forward because I can post it, before putting the committee together.
Okay.
But one thing to note also is that this is the same charge that was used for the last two superintendents searches, and this has been vetted by VSBA.
Okay. Is there, Sarah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just curious why we have both principals from Berry City, but none from Berry Town.
It should be one from each.
Okay.
Typo. Are there any other questions? Do you, I'm wondering if the board feels comfortable adopting this tonight, or would you like to hold this and put it on our agenda to adopt at our next meeting? Guy, Isabel? I know Alice is like telling me something, but Guy, go ahead.
No, I would have Carol, begin to, to list it, and then we can officially adopt it at the next meeting if you're concerned about whether it's an action item or not.
Well, I just think I'd like to make sure that we're very clear on our agenda, and I didn't catch that it wasn't an action item, so I apologize.
That's why I suggested what I did.
Okay. So are there any other questions or concern about the charge? Okay. So Carol, we won't adopt it tonight, but it sounds like we probably will at our very next meeting. And so I will put this on as an action item for 10/28. But we can go ahead and post, because the other item in the packet immediately following the screening committee charge is the letter that I received from Dan French saying that we could go ahead and begin our search for a permanent superintendent. So we have been given permission from the Agency of Education to go ahead and do that. And I think that's probably what gives us the ability to go ahead and start the ball rolling. Okay. All right. So we will add that to our next agenda. I apologize, Carol, for that oversight, and it will be on our next agenda. So next up, we are at 5.4, which is the listening session regarding the surplus funds. And at this point, I'm going to let Chris take over. And I think Jody Emerson is going to be our facilitator for online, so that all board members can have an opportunity to really listen, as well as administrators, and not have to worry about facilitating at the same time. So Chris and Jody, I will let you guys take over.
Thank you very much, Sonia. First, I'd like to thank everybody who's attended tonight, any community members who are going to be speaking and sharing their thoughts on the use of the surplus. I also want to thank all of our administrators and directors, our principals and directors who are here tonight. They are also here to participate in this listening session and hear what the community has to say and listen to a board discussion about it. This has impact on all of us, and it's very important that we're that we're putting this opportunity out to the community tonight. I'm really happy we're doing it. I'm going to lead off with a very brief presentation, sort of just give some perspective on the very, very basics of how our budget operates and how this surplus works, and just kind of give some context to what we're going to be discussing tonight. This is a presentation, will take about 5 minutes. Then I'm going to hand the baton to Jody, who's going to just facilitate. We'll go over some of the ground rules and all that. So what I'm going to do now is just share my screen with you. If you can just give me a moment. And Sonia, once it's up there, I won't be able to see what's going on. If you can just say, Chris, I can see it, and we're all good, that would be helpful to me.
Sure.
Here we go. Okay. It is, one moment, saying. Just trying to pull this up. Just give me a moment here. Okay. Sonia, what I'm going to ask you to do, if it's okay, because I know you have access to the presentation. Right now, it is saying that I am not able to share that. So if you would not mind just pulling that up.
Yes. Hold on.
And you should be able to share it.
Okay, let me try.
And if you can't do it, should be able to figure this out.
Okay.
While we're waiting for the technology, we could ask people who want to speak to at least start putting their names in the chat.
That'd be very helpful. And then Jody will be calling on people in order.
Except for Josh Howard, because he would like to go towards the end.
So I am saying I want to share my entire screen, and it says Chrome wants to share the contents of your screen with Meet Google, and share is grayed out. I can't. I can cancel.
What's going to happen is Josh Allen is here, and he has just texted me. He is going to share this right now.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Josh, because I can't do it.
And Sonia, thanks for your efforts. The good news, folks, is this is a fairly simple presentation. It'll be fairly quick.
All right, this is Josh. Hold on, trying to pull it up.
Thank you, sir.
Can people see that?
Yes.
Just put it in presentation mode, Josh, and we'll go from there. And if you can just kind of run through, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Just tell me when to switch.
You got it. So thank you. Welcome to our listening session today, October 14th. We're going to be talking about our surplus funds and how to use them. Josh, you can go to the next slide. Just a couple quick rules of the road for Jody and all participants. Each person is going to have up to 5 minutes to make a statement, share their thoughts. Our Central Vermont Career Center Director, Jody Emerson, is facilitating this. She'll be keeping time, calling on participants. Following the last participant, the board will then engage in discussion and Q&A between themselves and administration. This is not a Q&A with the community. It's for the board to engage in discussion with themselves and ask administration, those that are present, any questions they may have. Thank you, Josh. Before getting into some of the basics of this, I just wanted to do a quick review with everybody. You may recall about 7 weeks ago, it feels like a lifetime ago in some ways, that on August 28th, we had our first community forum in the Spalding High School auditorium on the ESSER 3 grant. This was a big success. We had a number of community members come in, and we gave kind of a primer on how the ESSER 3 grant works. Just to review that, the big takeaways from that. the Barry Unified Union School District has been awarded $10.5 million as part of this American Rescue Plan for the ESSER 3 grant to be used by September 30th, 2024. So we have just shy of 3 years to use these funds. And the really good news that came out of that process through a survey we put out to the community that month, where close to 100 people participated and shared their views, and the folks who came to the forum itself, was that we came up with a list of priorities. And really, the board, the school administration, the community itself was really on the same page with how they want to see those funds used. In a general sense, what we're looking at is HVAC upgrades, heating, ventilation, air conditioning upgrades at all 3 schools. We're looking at using these monies to fund current new hires and professional development for these new hires as part of our recovery plan. And a big one, a big priority, was boosting summer programs and before and after school programs in the community. This was a shared priority as well in the All In for Barry forum that Josh, Sonia, and I went to. So it's a big issue in the community. So this is something to really celebrate. This is a huge chunk of money that schools, a windfall, if you will, that schools all around the country have access to, and we are no different. So we're really excited about that. Though this is completely separate from the surplus funds we're going to be talking about this evening. A lot of the priorities are shared, and a lot of them can work together. So it's really important to know, but it is a separate pot of money. Josh, if you can move to the next one, please. So before getting into the surplus itself, I want to do a very basic kind of school finance 101 here. When I say that, I think I would like to point out to the board and our administrative team present, I think the community and all of us really could benefit in the future from a basic school finance 101 presentation in one of our future board meetings or as part of a future community forum. I think it's something we could all benefit from. Vermont school finance is an incredibly complex topic, even for those of us who've been working in it for years. Our own Lisa Perot can speak to the complexities of it, and anybody else who's familiar with it. But I just thought, just to kind of get into the very basics of what we're talking about here, and I want to be clear that this is not a comprehensive look at school finance in Vermont, but just kind of how our budget operates. And we've broken this down into 3 topics. Basically, the big picture of the school budget is revenues, expenditures, and the tax rate. And, you know, the first 2 are things that we can all relate to from our own household budgets, right? Revenue is the money we take in. For schools, it comes from a number of different sources, not all of which we can control, but many we can't. Revenues come from a wide variety of sources, including sending school tuition, special education reimbursement, transportation, state aid, and other sources. The other big picture piece here is expenditures. That's how we spend the money in our budget, the money that goes out. The biggest expenditure, of course, is staffing, but others include facilities, technology, curriculum, numerous others. Expenditures, of course, are where we have the most control in our budget development, how we put our budget together and focus on the priorities of the community and what we value. And the final thing is something we have very, very little control over, and that is our tax rate. So the tax rate for our school district is almost completely out of the board's control. It's determined by expenses and revenues, and expenses, of course, we do have control on. But the big pieces are the property yield, equalized pupils, that's the number of students we have in our district, and how the state basically counts those kiddos, and then the CLA, the common level of appraisal. A quick anecdote about the tax rate, which is a very, very big factor in obviously in the taxes that our community pays for their property. About 10 years ago in my own community, Montpelier, we had a reappraisal of properties, much like what happened in Barrytown. And I remember that the appraisal for my house went up almost $75,000. And there was a lot of panic in Montpelier at that time that our taxes were going to go up exponentially. But because the tax rate was lowered commensurately, our taxes that next year actually went down. So it was not anything we expected. Of course, I'm not saying that's necessarily what's going to happen here in Barry, but the tax rate is essential to understanding how our taxes are paid. So Josh, if you can go to the next slide, please. So getting to the budget surplus and what we're talking about tonight. The question is, what is it? What is a budget surplus? Why is ours so big this year? Very simply, a budget surplus occurs when you have fewer expenses than anticipated and more revenue than you expected. In other words, you're more in the black than you were expecting. So like many other districts in Vermont, ours was much bigger than usual this year, and it was really unexpected. Like the ESSER 3 grant, I want to kind of put in context for folks. This is something we really need to celebrate and be grateful for. I've worked in education for over 30 years, and typically you're dealing with very, very small surpluses or even deficits at the end of the year. And a surplus of this size is very, very unusual, and in fact unprecedented in my career and for most of us. The big factor in which determined this was, of course, the pandemic. And that's the case for schools all over Vermont. A few examples of COVID-related factors contributing to this were abnormally large numbers of unfilled positions, which we're still facing right now. This is an area that we don't want to celebrate. The fact that these positions aren't filled and haven't been for well over a year has had enormous impact on the operational capacity of our schools. As a result of it, our administrators, our teachers, our staff in general are stretched extraordinarily thin. That's been the case for the last year. Though it's saving money, it is not in any way a desired outcome for where we need to be. But we're also looking at lower utility bills and transportation costs as a result of the pandemic, capital improvement projects that needed to be delayed or just postponed indefinitely because of COVID-related issues. And then another big piece that I think we've undervalued is that through COVID funds, through ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and other sources, we were able to maximize the use of those funds for as many expenditures as possible. And as a result, we were able to save significant amounts of money from the general fund. So that too is something to celebrate. So Josh, the next slide, please. So getting down to brass tacks, what are we required to do with our surplus? What are our options? And this is important to note as we share our thoughts on this tonight. According to Vermont statute, if we have surplus funds, we can do a combination of three things or one of them or two of them. Carry the funds into next year, we can deposit the funds into a reserve fund, or we can use them for a specific purpose. As I said here, any combination of the three. So Josh, if you go to the next slide, we get to what our recommendations are. And they are indeed a combination of the three. So my recommendation to the board is relatively unchanged since we first made it at the beginning of the school year. The actual unaudited surplus as it stands today is at $2,800,000. In a nearly $50 million budget, that is not a small amount of money. And it's fluctuated a bit. It's been at the 3 million range, 3.2, but it currently is standing at 2.8. The recommendations are that we take 1.2 million of that and apply them to capital improvements. What has been discussed are everything from completing the sprinkler system at Spalding High School, which is right now about 30 to 40% complete, and we'd like to get that done. We're one of the few schools in the state of Vermont that is not fully sprinkled over at Spalding. We're looking at completing paving projects, roofing projects, other capital improvement, big ticket items that it could be a great benefit to take care of. We're also looking to close out the current expense note for C, which is $1 million, give or take. This is a case of paying it off now will save the district money in the long run on interest, and it would be just great to take care of that note. That's what we're strongly recommending. And then a big piece of this is tax stabilization for FY22 of $600,000. Before talking a little bit about tax stabilization and wrapping this presentation up, I just want to state once again what an opportunity this is to actually improve learning opportunities, facilities for our kids. And again, it's something the community should celebrate. But I want to wrap up quickly with a quick note on tax stabilization. Josh, the next slide. How does the board determine how much tax stabilization funds to assign to the budget. The key word, and we italicize it there, is stabilization. Keeping taxes as level funded as possible is always the goal. That has been my experience in all my years in Barry. It remains the goal, coming from the local boards that we had for the schools to the district, the board that we have now. That has never changed. Ultimately, it helps taxpayers to budget accordingly and prevent spikes in tax rates, which is what we're all looking to do, and all those things that are outside of our control. So with that, I want to say thank you. I want to hand the ball off to Jody. And Josh, really appreciate you rallying there to help with that presentation. And this is, again, a chance to kind of just share your thoughts. Jody, I hand it off to you, and thank you all for listening, everybody.
Thank you, Chris. So I have 3 people who have signed up to speak on this. So if you haven't put your name in the chat yet, but you still want to speak, please do so. And Josh Howard, I will move you down the list as that happens so that you can get to a place where you have good service. It looks like Terry Rail will be the first one to start, and I hope I got your name right. And you have the 5 minutes, and I'll just put that on my cell phone. And when you get to 3 minutes, I'll just hold up 2 fingers to warn you that there's 2 minutes left.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. The further down the road we go with this item, the more concerns I have. First, this listening session was supposed to be the one main topic for this meeting. Now it's a line item in the agenda for a normal board meeting. There was no specific announcement to the community that there would be a listening session on this topic. While the board and the district keep repeating that the community's input is wanted, valued, and considered, this process doesn't necessarily say that. It should have been warned so people knew exactly that that's what was happening tonight. I'd like to mention some things regarding the surplus funds. The urgency being characterized by some of the board and the district to get these funds allocated are wholly created by the board and the district. There is no rush and no reason to push the allocation of this money. The community, as Chris laid out, needs to understand these are not the only extra funds available to the school and district. There's many millions of dollars on the table above and beyond the surplus money and the current budgets, not just ESSER money, there's other money as well. The district has also already said there will likely be another surplus this year. Amount undetermined, but another surplus this year. The board and district are also talking about beginning the budgeting process for the coming year. And there's also discussion about a budget increase already. The process hasn't even started yet, and the board and district are talking about another budget increase. The proposed sprinkler project that Chris brought up at Spalding is being characterized as required. First, the dollar figure being used is based on a 2016 estimate. As of last week, a discussion I had with them, there wasn't a current quote in hand. The required piece is based on assumptions. A determination of whether this project is required or not will not officially be made until the project is permitted and evaluated. It is certainly not, it is not a certainty that this project is required. Characterizing it as such is misleading. If for some reason the board and district allocate this money for a project and then don't use it for that project, it can then be used elsewhere without community involvement or input. The district also mentioned the C note that Chris was talking about, that if we do not allocate funds to pay for that C note, that we'll have to put extra money in the budget for that. The C note was in place before this surplus came to be, so there should already be monies in the regular budget to meet our commitments. So to say that we need to allocate extra funds for that just doesn't seem right. So certainly somebody with more financial experience than I am should certainly look at that, right? But with these concerns, I, for one, feel it is in the best interest of the community that this item be decided by the voters. This is not a small amount of money, and the community members deserve a chance to weigh in on how this money is used. Other much smaller surpluses have gone to the voters for approval. With this much money, the voters should decide. Thank you.
Thank you. Well under time there. Diane Solomon?
Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. I've tried to write down my thoughts so I can speak expediently, however I may race through it. I wanted to share my thoughts on the excess funds. I've heard recommendations for facility improvements. I do think that the sprinkler system at the high school has been recommended for capital improvements, and it does make sense given the safety for our students. especially given the upcoming work with the ventilation that's going to be paid for with the ESSER funding. However, I'm not comfortable allocating all surplus funds to capital improvements without oversight by voters. I also agree that this is a large amount of money, and I want to be involved and aware of where this money may be spent. I do suggest that some of the surplus money be given back to administrators who were faced with board recommendations to cut money from valuable programs and staffing to make the third budget vote passable. I'm speaking specifically about a few passions that I have, and I'll just be brief. At the Berrytown Elementary and Middle School, the pistol program was cut. This was an extremely valuable program for extending learning for 5th to 8th grade students. And my older son, had great value with this program. I'm also going to speak briefly about co-curricular athletics at the high school, specifically the hockey program that had actual staffing cuts because of the budget revote. The hockey program has one varsity program with a paid coach, and they use it as 2 co-coaches. Most of the other athletic programs have 2 paid positions for their programs. This budget cut affected multiple paid assistant coaches. The assistant coaches work similar to JV coaches as they help the younger players develop skills and are an important component to our students' athletic lives. I want to put names to these coaches that have been impacted. Andy Grambois has been with the boys program for generations and is invaluable. Recent graduates have returned to share their time and skills through our boys program. Denver Heath, Evan Parent, Kevin Avery. These are members of our Barry community that have been impacted by the cuts. And with this amount of surplus money, it seems reasonable to consider reinstating these positions. Finally, I want the board and community to hear and understand the importance of co-curriculars to our high school students. Students in high schools are in a place in their lives where they're reaching out to other trusted adults to explore new interests and continue athletic endeavors. These clubs and sports tie and build our high school community and are a vital part for these members of our supervisory union. I want the board to hear and consider that these avenues are important and should be considered for the use of the extra funds and for future budget considerations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Diane. It doesn't look like anyone besides Josh Howard was wishing to speak. So Josh, are you able to do so now?
I sure am. So I guess I'd like to start off with what Chris was saying about the appraisals and taxes, tax rates going down. Yeah, obviously when you do an appraisal and values go up, the tax rate's going to go down. But as everyone in Berrytown has witnessed this year, our tax bills, like I said, went way up. Some extremely much. My property went up almost twice value. So you can imagine what my tax bill is right now. It's extremely a lot more. Berry City is about to have the same fate next year, and they can just talk to us over here and let them know what's going to happen. As far as the surplus money and all that, we can start off with the sprinkler system. When the assistant fire marshal even said that the building in Spalding is not unsafe without the sprinkler upgrade, that should be taken seriously. That should be taken to heart. As far as the board trying to avoid voters being able to vote on this money, going as far as saying it was a deadline, kind of a deadline, because if we don't allocate this money, then the community gets to decide. It's kind of disgusting. I don't understand why you guys want to just spend and not talk to people in the community. I think every last penny of this should go up to the community to vote. I don't want to see any of it go to the surplus funds for tax evasion whatsoever. That's a one-time shot. That's once it's spent, it's gone, and it just ends up with a bigger budget, ends up with a bigger tax bill at the end of the day. I understandably that tax rates do fluctuate as property values change, but tax bills seem to always go up. You're talking about having an increase in the budget already next year when you have a $3 million budget surplus this year. Already talking about a surplus for next year. I don't understand why you guys can't balance the budget, make it zero. It seems pretty simple when you have, I can say it simply like this. You don't have a revenue issue, you guys have a spending issue. And it just needs to stop. And you're going to have a hard time passing the budget next year with these bad decisions. That's all I got.
Thank you, Josh. Stacy typed in the comments that she agrees with Diane and would add back transportation for field trips also. Jan Trepanier?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me? Thank you. Thank you for doing this, by the way. I just want to say, I think safety is top concern over everything, especially in light of the pandemic and what we have all been through and continue to go through every day at work, wearing our masks, hoping to breathe good, clean air, and just hoping to stay healthy and alive. So, as a community member all of my life here, going to school at Spalding and Berry City schools, my children, my grandchildren to be, I want to put my vote in for good quality air, good ventilation, and the sprinkler systems. Because without that, I mean, we're in trouble. And we know it needs to be improved. Everyone knows that. It needs to be upgraded. I don't see how anything could be more important than safety for our children, for ourselves, for all of us. So that's where I put my vote. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Ed Roos, you've raised your hand. Go ahead.
I just want to speak to the sprinkler system, and it's good points that I've heard all the way around on the, I've heard about this for a little bit now. And there's an argument as to the necessity with regards to it being a brick building, but I was speaking to somebody who was formerly in the fire safety division of the state, and he had said that the money possibly in our situation could better be spent on an alarm system to keep people safe rather than have a sprinkler system that might faultily go off and ruin many of the contents. And I didn't know if the board or anybody had heard of a very effective alarm system as opposed to a sprinkler system. And I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Victoria Pompey.
There we go. I apologize. I'm using my phone, so it's a little bit harder. In my opinion, I think, again, yes, we're going to have a surplus again this year. What we should be looking for more is, yes, spending down the debt that we have for the C building and making any improvements that will save money in the long term. And that's really it. I feel as though trying to find projects at this point, we're just looking for ways to waste the money and not really use it the most effectively. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Jody, thank you for running us through that. If there's nobody else who wants to jump in, Victoria, your hand's still up. Are you good?
My apologies. Yes, I am.
No, thank you. And it's tough doing this on the phone. Thank you for sharing. So at this point, we would like to hand the conversation over to the school board and for you guys to discuss what you heard, other thoughts. The floor is now the board's for discussion.
So I'm assuming, do you want me to moderate this part?
It's we're kind of going back into board discussion. I think if you're up for it, Sonia, that would be great.
I just want to make sure. Guy, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of clarifications. What was the percentage of interest on the note for the C project? I can't remember that. Does anybody remember that?
That's a good question, and I don't think Lisa's here with us tonight to be able to answer that. But I also think there are a couple of other things that I'm not sure. I think there might be some more details coming to light about the note. So I had a conversation with Lisa. She'd have to be able to be here to explain it further. Sarah, go ahead. Can you help answer that?
I can't answer the note on the interest. I can tell you that the budget for FY22 and going into planning for FY23, we are budgeted for the interest payments on that. So paying off the note early is just trying to save the interest. And I have queried Lisa, and I think she might be sick. I'm sorry. So I think that's why she's not here. But she would be able to get us those numbers, but I don't have them right now. It is already budgeted though.
Okay, thanks. I mean, the reason I asked that is, cheap money may be a thing of the past, and if we continue to have cheap money, then that may be another way to look at this. But I'm not opposed to paying that off because certainly it came in at a higher place than what we thought was going to come in. The other question I have is, in terms of the tax stabilization piece, have we changed the recommendation from 800,000 to 600,000, or is that something I missed?
That's correct, Guy. Because the surplus had actually gone down. So remember, it had fluctuated between 3.2. It's now at 2.8. So that's why that number had changed.
Okay, thank you.
By the way, any questions that I'm not going to be able to answer or anybody in the finance committee can answer, I'm writing down for Lisa. She is indeed under the weather tonight, so that's why she's not here.
Okay, so I see two hands up. Gina, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment. I heard people say, and I know it's come up before, about using this surplus funds to reinstate positions that were cut as we tried to get the last budget passed, which I know was an extremely painful process for all of us. And another thing that we've talked about a lot is what happens when we add positions with ESSER funds or grants that are going to be expiring in a year or two. And I would make that point that by using a surplus to reinstate positions that we cut to help control the budget is going to put us in that same position, because next year or the year after, we're going to be looking at a scenario where to keep those positions, you're going to have an even greater impact on the budget because they've been cut completely and now they're going back in. So I think that part of the challenge here is balancing good use of these funds in the short term with long-term stewardship of the district, and we have to think about the short-term and long-term impacts of all of these decisions.
Thank you, Gina. Sarah?
Thank you. Just a couple of clarifying facts for people who aren't in the finance committee and might have missed the last meeting or the minutes. So the reason that the surplus is now 2.8 million, whereas I know we were looking at just over 3 before, is because when we were looking at it before, we were looking at just the FY21 numbers. So for that one fiscal year, our surplus was over 3 million. But the issue is, and it came up with the auditors doing their work now, that the FY20 fiscal year, FY20, we actually went in with a deficit of a few $100,000. So that's why when it's netted together, that's why we've got just a surplus that we're looking at of 2.8 right now. So I also know that it was mentioned that we're looking at a surplus for FY22. Those numbers are really, really preliminary. We just saw them at the finance committee. It's it's under, I think it was like $150,000. And again, a lot of that's related to open positions that we're still hoping that we can fill and get some relief for our staff. So just a couple of clarifying points that were discussed in the last finance committee that everybody may not know about.
Thanks, Sarah. Chris?
Thanks, Sonia. To both Gina and Sarah's points, I want to just very quickly talk about these unfilled positions. Remember that one of the major sources anyway, of the surplus itself is these unfilled positions. And there is very, very little talk in the preliminary budget development discussions about adding positions next year. Our focus is to simply fill those that we have open now. And this is a very important point to note, that the staffing shortages and teacher shortages that we're looking at now are predicted to get worse throughout New England in next year's hiring season. So that's just to Gina's excellent point. I Our focus right now is filling these positions with the best people we can, the ones that we currently have open now. And I think that's really important to note.
Thanks, Chris. Is there anybody else on the board that would like to speak that hasn't had a chance? Tim, Alice, Renee, Chris, Abby, anybody else who'd like to, has any questions, any clarifying comments? Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, I still believe that we need to get like a qualified financial advisor to really kind of talk us through what the best use of this money is. It needs to be somebody disinterested, somebody clearly not in this system. I agree. Paying down our loans and notes and stuff are really, really important, but we also need to make sure that this money goes where we're saying it's going. But other than that, and we clearly need to put the things back in the budget that affect students, like the coaches. So, and that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the board that hasn't had a chance to weigh in? So to be clear, the listening session and this part of it, the discussion and reflection, we will obviously not make any decisions tonight. So this is just an opportunity to sort of give some, if you have questions that you want to pose that we can get answered in time, this is the time to do it, because we are hoping to be able to make some decisions if we do want to make a decision in a timely manner. So and I would also say that we can make decisions about some of the surplus, all of the surplus, none of the surplus. I mean, we can choose. We don't have to say we're going to do something with all of it. We could say we want to do this part of the superintendent's recommendation and not the other parts. We could make those decisions. We could go out to the voters. We can make those, have that conversation. But I think now is a good time if you have questions, because I know that there are a lot of questions that continue to come up. I want to make sure we have your questions answered. So when we have a discussion and are ready to move forward and have a vote on something, that you've gotten your questions answered. Guy, Isabel?
Yeah, thanks, Sonia. So I just want to clarify a couple things, and maybe, Chris, you can help me with this. I understand that we budgeted funds for positions that we ended up not being able to fill, and I certainly appreciate that. I understand we don't have a higher sign out at the schools, but everybody else does. So, but here's my thinking. I agree that we need those people, and I agree that we should budget those people again next year. Is my thinking that because we didn't hire those people and the people weren't available, that that the taxpayers perhaps should get a refund for what didn't happen? And my thinking is, and I'm going to try to simplify this, because as a hobby, I rebuild cars. And when I don't use parts, I end up bringing them back. And they give me my money back. And maybe that's an oversimplification. But where I'm going with this is that, I think, and the other, unfortunately, the other advantage I may have is I sit on the board of the Barrytown Civil Authority, and I've had the opportunity to listen to tax grievances. And I can tell you that, while probably Josh Howard and I haven't always agreed that the results of the tax or the results of the appraisals were probably much higher in Berrytown as a result of what the market is. The timing of all this was unfortunate. So there are a number of people who have been impacted. So I come from that perspective. I'm not making necessarily any recommendations. I guess what I'm saying is, if people thought they were giving money to purchase something and they didn't get it, then do we have an obligation to somehow help them out? And that doesn't mean that we don't. I understand. I talked to Sonia about kicking the can down the road and next year and blah blah blah. But the problem is we're talking about last year and about things we didn't use. So I don't know if my thinking is correct or not, and I'm sorry for a lengthy piece.
So, Guy, I'm going to ask you a couple clarifying questions. When you say something like a refund, I'd like to ask you to clarify what you mean by that, because I'm not sure.
I'm not talking about a refund. I'm talking about the ability to be able to use some of the money to help stabilize, the budget for this year. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a refund. I'm talking about, taking into effect that, we didn't use the money. Chris outlined tonight very good reasons why we didn't, and so we say, thank you very much. You approved the budget. We ended up not needing it. We're going to try to help you out by applying it, or trying to make this budget season a little easier on you. I don't know what that's going to be. There's a lot of things up in the air. We don't have contracts settled. I read an article today about fuel bills are probably going to be could be 40% higher. Okay, so not only are we have that issue, our voters are going to have that issue. I mean, if you're heating with fuel oil and you're facing 43% increase in fuel oil prices, that's scary for people. That's where I'm coming from, Sonia.
Okay. I understand. I have a comment back for you, but we have a few other people. Noah Rubel has raised his hand, and Noah, I would love to hear you speak on this. I'm assuming it's Noah and maybe not someone else, but this is just board discussion at this time. And I really want to hear what you have to say because you're a student at Spalding. So I'm not going to call on you right now, but I may give you an opportunity if we have some time after the board has had a chance to finish their discussion. So I would just ask you to hold your thought. Chris Parker, go ahead.
Thanks. So some of what we heard tonight from community members is in support of things that have been cut that directly relate to students. The pistol program, field trip transportation, coaches, salaries, and different things like that. And I hear the piece about, so those were cut for this year. And so if we use some of this money to put it back in for this year, then next year we have the same problem. But I do want, or in subsequent budgets, I do wonder about looking at using some of that money to fund those things for several years into the future. So to say, okay, how much does the pistol program cost? Okay, it costs this amount of dollars. Could we not put some of that money into a fund to say, this amount right here is going to fund the pistol program for the next 10 years or the next 5 years or whatever period we say. I hear people saying those things that really, really matter to kids, and especially when life is tricky right now with COVID and kids have lost so much over the past few years. Just how can we use this money in ways that directly affect kids, and with programs that through things being cut have directly impacted kids negatively. And so I just think about, could we use that money to almost like a scholarship fund for the pistol program and for coaching staff and for transportation, to say, hey, we know that this might not fit into the budget over the next few years naturally, but we can use this money to make sure that those things can be safe and not cut, because we're going to fund it sort of ahead of time. And also, I just want to say thank you to the community members who came tonight, and thanks to folks who spoke up also and gave your thoughts. I appreciate it.
So now I see 2 community members who have their hands raised. Is there anybody else on the board who'd like to comment or ask a question or clarify anything? Renee, go ahead.
I'd just like to second everything that Chris said. I think she explained it really well, so I won't go into it again. But I think that if we have programs that community members and students felt like were really helpful for them, and if we can have the money to do it, yes, it may be 2, 3, 4 years down the road, we might have to cut it. But at least for now, if we can bring it back and then try to figure out those things later, I think it might be worth it, because we're not, the amount of money that we're talking about isn't ginormous. So I think that it's something that we should consider.
Okay, thank you. Chris, do you want to go before I give the community members another chance?
Quick thing that might be helpful to what both Chris and Renee just stated. Remember, one of the first slides on that presentation was about the ESSER 3 fund, and there's significant money for exactly what Chris and Renee are talking about through ESSER. Up to $3 million was what we estimated for positions as part of our recovery plan, which could include everything folks are talking about. So this is an opportunity. I just want to remind folks that there are these 2 pots of money. One is almost 5 times, well, my math is wrong, let's say 2.5 times the size of the surplus, and can address a lot of those social emotional needs that have not been met the last 2 years, academic needs. It's all part of the recovery plan. So it's all related, and significant money's in there for it. I just want to remind people of that.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Gina? You're on mute.
I lost connection for a minute, so I apologize if I missed this, but I wanted to go back to what Guy was talking about, because this keeps on coming up. And so either I misunderstand something or other people do, and I want to be very clear. The point of the tax stabilization fund is to literally do what Guy is talking about, is to take extra money that the district has and set it aside so that moving forward, if we have a budget increase, or that we can offset an increase that is going to increase the tax rate in our community, right?
Yeah.
So in theory, we could take the entire surplus, the $2.8 million, and put it in the tax stabilization fund. And that would effectively be saying, okay, we're going to set this money aside. I think that we've already legally looked into the idea of giving refunds to taxpayers, which is not feasible. The only mechanism we have for doing anything like that is by putting money into the tax stabilization fund.
Yes.
The problem with doing that is that you do have these big ticket items that are going to be coming up that are going to have to go into the budget in the future regardless. Either it's going to be, we have to pay off the note and the interest, which are going to be in the budget, or we're going to, at some point, we're going to have to sprinkle Spalding. We can all argue about whether or not it needs to be now or in 5 years or in 10 years, but at some point we're going to have to sprinkle the building. That is going to have to happen. So, so at that point, when those big ticket items come into the budget, then you're going to be running into the same thing where you have some kind of budget increase that you can't control at all. And so my impression from the recommendations that we've been receiving from the administration is that we're trying to balance this. We're trying to put money towards tax stabilization, which is as close as we can get towards giving a refund to taxpayers, while also taking some big ticket items off the table so that they are not hitting the budget hard in the future. Is that an accurate representation of where we're at?
Yes, I think so. And to be clear, the recommendation isn't to put it into tax stabilization because that is a separate fund, just like the capital improvement fund. It's to just leave it in our general fund, and then it can be applied. Okay, so as Sarah said, if we run $150,000 surplus this year, and we leave that in our general fund, but next year we have a $500,000 deficit, we have to cover that in some way. We can't take money out of tax stabilization to cover that. We can take money out of a general fund. So the recommendation that Lisa has made is to leave the money in general fund is so it can be applied when we need to use it. And I think Lisa has been very good about making those recommendations so that we can use the money the way that we need to use it when we need to use it. But yes, I think all of your points are correct. And if Sarah, if I'm wrong, you can chime in. I think that Gina hit the nail on the head. So we have a few more people that have, we have more time, so I'm going to let the other board member guy raise his hand again, and then as long as and Sarah has raised her hand again, as long as the rest of the board is okay with opening up a round 2 for community members, because we have some community members who would like to speak again or have not had a chance the first time. Is the board okay with that? It looks like I got some thumbs up and head nods. Okay. So I'm going to go through Guy and Sarah because they have their hands raised and we're doing board discussion right now. And then we'll go through the list for people who have their hands raised that are community members. So Guy, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a couple of clarifications because I really appreciate the discussion. Part of me thinks that we ought to increase the tax stabilization piece, number one. Number two is part of me also thinks that we should maybe tone down, some of the major projects we're taking a look at, but maybe accelerate them, only because I know we have been, for example, with the roof fund, we have been very good about taking care of the roofs. If Jamie were here tonight, maybe he is. He would say we've done a really good job about, a plan for that. We could accelerate that a little bit, but we don't need to complete it all right now. The other thing is, in terms of this year's budget, we certainly can, we can include in this year's budget, pieces that were taken out last year. And oh, by the way, one of those pieces that were taken out was our per square footage amount that we were applying towards our facility. So we could bump that back up. And I think within the amount of money we're taking a look at in terms of the surplus, we could have some compromises and get a lot of what we want and still give people a little bit of relief. That's where I'm coming from.
Thanks, Guy. Sarah, did you have your hand up? No? Okay. I looked back and it was not up. Okay, so I am going to, there are 3 people with their hands raised right now. These are community members. And Noah Rubel is first, and then I have Josh Howard, and then Nancy Leclerc. But I think Nancy had her hand up, and I'm going to call in not in that order. I'm going to call in Noah, Nancy, and then Josh, because I think Nancy had her hand up and then put her hand down, and Josh has also had an opportunity to speak. So I'm going to let Noah and Nancy go first, and then call on Josh. So Noah, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak. It's good to be here. So I had first of all, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. So I had a couple of thoughts first. I wanted to talk about the tax issue. I'm curious. So going back to what Guy Isbell was saying, it might be is it something to consider tax returns? It depends on tax returns might be something to consider on depending on if the money is not being used properly and being returned and maybe that might be worth returning to the people if a percentage of that money is just being left as surplus, unless we can do something viable with it. I think, as a lot of people have said, there are a lot of good issues that at Spalding, I know as a student that there are a lot of things in our district that I think that could be worth noting about. Like as a cross-country athlete, I've noticed a lot that, like, and just as a student, our coach, Colonel Singer, he's always talking about how, like, the district's really struggling to get, like, bus scheduling going. If we could, is there, like, because just, like, there's an absence of bus drivers, and I don't know if this is a statewide issue, but, like, maybe, like, one thing worth would be, like, being able to use some of that budgeting to help support transportation and getting more funding for our bus drivers. Or, like, school equipment I also think is viable, but I think it's also worth thinking about it in all the other ways school equipment can be used. I'm like both in, like, I think we're always in demand for new products that can be helpful. Like, I'm like a lot of the textbooks, like Spalding has always needed new textbooks for whatever class it is, and I've always noticed that. Or like getting new proper materials that we could use for the fine arts department, or like for like band or for art classrooms. Depending on how much of priority is above that, I can understand if that issue has to be sidelined. But there's a lot of materials that I think each classroom can viably need, which could be addressed too. Another thing I wanted to ask about was spreading voice and knowledge about the board meetings. For me as a senior, I had it was I found the board meeting through just like the spalding.org like website, and I thought that was simple enough. But I think it would be nice to have more students my age or even younger contributing to these board meetings, or at least like observing. Like if maybe like we could start like getting these things in like school newsletters or principal newsletters. I think that would be really helpful too, but that might just be more of a school thing from our administration, and that might not be a board issue to consider about. Another issue I was curious about was communication with the community itself. Is in what ways do we directly reach out to the community to participate? What I'm asking more is like, I'm more curious about like the actual like business aspect of Barry itself. Like I'm talking about like downtown. Does Spalding and the Barry board, do they do any interactions with the Barry partnership in any way? So like, because I know there's a lot of businesses that are trying to like develop and like function well in downtown Barry, or just even in the greater Barry area or the central Vermont area. How much business can we do with them? Is there business we can do with them? Because I know, like, for example, in the past, like Maria's Bagels, they have like sold bagels to Spalding, so that's like, or like through the Barry district, so that's like one way. Or is there other ways to get like food plans, like after school activities, like support done through those things? And sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions, but then the last thing I wanted to ask about was also, is there like, in terms of now that the union has been merged into one, how many differences are still being seen in between the Barry City and Barry Town education system? Is there a like desire to have them become more similar? Are they trying to stay in place? Is there a plan in the future to merge the elementary and middle schools together? What programs are being gone for? Because for me, I've never heard of Pistol before. That's just not something I did. So I'm just curious what is intended in terms of like aligning the Barry City and Barry Town education plans. I think those are all the questions I had. Thank you for letting me speak.
Noah, first of all, I know Noah personally, and I appreciate all of your questions. Some of them are a little off topic of the surplus, but I still appreciate the questions, and I appreciate you showing up. And I definitely appreciate the fact that you're asking how can we get more students involved. I think we definitely will have to have a side conversation. We could talk, and I can probably answer some of your questions, and then I'm sure Ms. Waterhouse and Mr. Hennessy would love to have a further conversation with you about other questions that you had. But thank you for participating. I love having students here, so I really appreciate that.
Sorry about the more off-topic questions, but
no,
to focus on the budget, that makes more sense. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. But yes, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate all your questions. Next is Nancy. Nancy Leclerc. Nancy, are you there?
Hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Hi, thank you very much for your time and taking our comments and questions. I'm just listening to everything. I just have a couple of comments. I was wondering if we could explore additional ways to get some of this information out to the community. I'm not sure what all the avenues are. I know Front Porch Forum has been used, but I'm thinking that we could do a better job at getting the community aware of what's going on. The other thing is, I'm not sure who mentioned this, but they brought up the fact of getting an outside company or consulting firm to come in and help kind of separate, you know, budget versus surplus and how to best use our surplus. And I've heard some of the sports and some of the, like the transportation is needed for the sports and then some of the coaches. So it would be great to explore those, but do like a cost benefit analysis. Maybe this company could come in and help do some projections on if this is what you've got, how far out before we run into trouble or make the fact that we want to do this. And then also just taking the money, and we know we're going to have a budget and tax increases and other surplus coming in. I just want to think that we would make the best use of this surplus and maybe some one-time items that we might not be able to afford would be best. But I just think we need some help with this and maybe some analysis projections on, you know, these things that we would like to have and just make sure we're headed down the right path. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Next, I'm going to call on Jackie Rockstar, which is an awesome name. I really love that. And then Josh, you'll get a chance after that, Josh Howard. So go ahead, Jackie.
Hi, sorry about that. I don't know how to change it. So I am late to the game. I'm sorry. Did what?
So is your first name Jackie?
Yes, it is. And that is not my last name.
Rockstar? Okay, what is your last name?
Wheeler.
Okay, thank you, Jackie.
It's an old name.
Record.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, Wheeler. Sorry about that. We're in pre-K, so this is early, but I wanted to be on here. So I'm late, so I apologize if I'm repeating. Was anything brought up about COVID stuff yet that I missed?
Nope, we're doing a budget surplus listening session right now. So
yes.
If you would like to talk about COVID, that is going to be next on the agenda.
Oh, okay. So, and we did talk about buses. Thank you. That was Noah, right? Thank you for that. So how are bus drivers paid currently? Are they all part-time? Or how is that structured? I know the riders are part-time because I know you just increased the pay to like $25 an hour for the 4 hours to ride on the buses. How are the full-time or actual bus drivers paid?
So
Not
yeah, I was planning on
like
updating
through
that
the
in my
school.
COVID update, if that would be helpful.
So
The what? I'm
Jackie,
sorry.
it sounds like transportation is going to be covered in the COVID update. So can we hold that question until then?
Okay, so no transportation. Okay, all right. I think that's it then.
All right, thank you, Jackie. And Josh, I'm going to call on you, and then I think we'll wrap up the listening session unless any other board members would like to chime in. Go ahead, Josh Howard.
Thank you. First of all, I will say thanks to Noah for coming in and speak up. I like to hear more students speak at these things. Second, Nancy, I think you hit the nail right on the head, getting an efficiency management firm to come in, take a look at how the school is being run. Not just the small things, but everything as far as administrator to teacher ratio, so on and so forth. You know, they're typically really good at finding money to save. And I mean, I'm having a hard time, Sonia, believing and trusting board recommendations and saying, oh, the refund could be a tax stabilization fund. By example, the whole David Wells thing where asked him to resign, and then hid $85,000 in line items, and then told voters he didn't tell the voters. And something you should know about me is usually I ask a question, I already know the answer. That's what I asked last time about David Wells. I already knew. And I haven't heard anything from you about that one. But yeah, every single penny should go to the voters, to the surplus, and let them decide. The trust isn't there with the board anymore.
Okay, thanks, Josh. So are there any other comments from the board? Are there any other questions that we have? Sarah, go ahead.
Sorry, and Chris, you might have been planning on covering this under COVID, but just because it was recommended in the listening session, when they were talking about having current employees drive buses, I just want to clarify, the bus drivers are not our employees, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So the bus drivers are employees of the busing company. Okay, all right, that's it.
Alice?
Just to, all of the questions that had been brought my way have been either expressed or have been directly addressed in the course of conversation. But my reminder would be that before we go spending any money willy-nilly, if we are going to make sure that our students all benefit from it, that we should make sure that our spending corresponds to the strategic plan. And that's my good word for the evening.
Thank you, Alice. Okay, so Jamie Evans coming in with a late hand. Go ahead, Jamie.
Well, just kind of waiting my turn. So, I appreciate this listening session too, and thank you for everybody who's made their comments. And I feel like it's important for me to share some of the questions that came up and comments that came up in regards to the sprinkler system. And I made several notes, so I might pause a little bit in between here. Number one, I was very happy to hear people say it's just for safety. How can you discredit, how can you dispute safety? So I want to make that, my number one comment. Gina made the comment that, and she's 100% accurate, we are going to have to do this. The state fire marshal has indicated we will have to do this. The reason we haven't done it to this point, and it's true, the building is not unsafe as long as nothing happens. And I'm not trying to use this as a scare tactic. I'm just stating, in my opinion, the obvious. Yes, the building is safe, but God forbid, should we have some type of a fire event, our fire alarm panel will sound the alarm. It will notify people to get out. But if you happen to be in that bad area where there may be some type of fire smoke event, there is no sprinkler system in the majority of the building. So just want to kind of clear that up. We do have a fire alarm panel. We upgraded that a couple of years ago. And the entire building is what's called an addressable system. So if a smoke detector, heat detector is activated, it's going to sound the alarm, but it's going to notify the fire department where that issue is within the building. So we do have a fully functioning, up-to-date fire alarm panel system. So I just want to kind of clear that question up that came up as well. Another point that the state fire marshal brought up is that any major modifications we do to our building in the future, and a major modification may not necessarily be huge by looking at it, but could be huge in the sense of the dollar amount and or the type of work that it is. But any major modification is going to trigger the sprinkler system. Our hands will be tied to doing any kind of major modification if we don't have a sprinkler system. And going forward, speaking to the ESSER monies, we are applying for ESSER monies, to upgrade our ventilation system in all of our buildings. At Spalding High School, in order to upgrade our ventilation system, that is a major modification. That's going to tie our hands to be able to accept, potentially millions of dollars towards an HVAC improvement to our building because we don't have a sprinkler system. So let's not, kind of shoot ourselves in the foot by not spending the money again, number one, for safety, but then not being allowed to upgrade our ventilation system, especially in today's world, because we don't have a sprinkler system. Those are the comments I wanted to share and kind of answer some questions that came up. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Okay, so I appreciate everybody for participating. I appreciate all the people who came, administrators and of course school board members and school employees, but also community members and parents and students. And I just appreciate that we've had over the course of the call, the high I saw was 57 people, and I'm just impressed that we have this many people who want to participate or observe and listen and understand what's going on. And so I do appreciate that everyone has taken the time to be here tonight to do that. This isn't the last time we'll talk about the surplus. It will come back around. It will probably be on our next agenda, where the board will hopefully try to hash out what we want to do and how we're going to move forward. So I would encourage you, if you want to find out what happens next, then please tune in on October 28th. But for now, I'd like to move on because even though we're a bit ahead of schedule, 6.1, the COVID update, I expect will probably take a little more time than maybe the 20 minutes we had originally allotted. So, and since no one else is here with a hand raised or any other comments, I'd like to move on to do that. So thank you, everybody. And Jody just left, but thank you to Jody for moderating facilitating that other part of the meeting. I appreciate that. So moving on to 6.1, the COVID update. I have a couple of people who would like to speak on this, but I have Marcy and Josh, and I don't know if there's anybody else. I know that we just had Jackie Wheeler comment, and did someone else comment as well? About
I'll be able to address Jackie's question for sure.
Okay, so would you like to do the presentation first, Chris, and then have public comment, or would you like to do public comment for what's your?
I think I'll take, at the risk of speaking for any of my fellow administrators who are here present, I would welcome the community to speak first. I think that would be helpful. So
okay,
that would be fine.
So Marcy, are you still here? Marcy, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to speak. Thank you for being patient. Go ahead.
Yes, I am still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I came to the last board meeting and spoke regarding the contact tracing. But I'm sure everyone is equally as frustrated with the situation. And I just wanted the board to know that I have basically now almost lost my job because I have missed so much work. And it's a real issue for our family. And I understand that I have friends that have had multiple contacts. And I also understand that we're trying to keep everyone safe and do the right thing, but I'm wondering if the risk of this contact tracing as far as socioeconomic problems for families, kids missing school, getting behind, is worth all of this missed school. I'm wondering how many of the contacts are actually testing positive and if we're seeing an impact on lowering the spread or the number of cases at the school. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcy. Marcy. Thank you, Marcy, for that. Those are good questions. And Josh Howard, I think you're the only other person. If I miss somebody, can you just please raise your hand, because there's a lot of comments in the chat and I may have missed it. So Josh, go ahead.
Well, first off, Marcy, I'm sorry to hear about that. I feel your pain. My middle daughter has spent more days at home this year than at school because of close contact tracing. My son is now on a second bout of his second full week of quarantining for close contact. I can tell you no one knows my house is tested positive yet. I guess, Chris, I just want to beg again to have a backup plan in place. I understand close contact tracing comes down from the state. You don't have a lot of play with that, but I feel we can do better and better for our community. I have the luxury of being an at-home dad, so it's not affecting a job for me, but I can only imagine the pain and the hardship people are going through that don't have that opportunity like I have. Really, we just got to get a backup plan together. My son, like I said, is his second week home for quarantine since the school year started. And we already went through the whole packet that the school gave us. I can't get an email back from his teacher about more work to do. All I get is website links that are, quite frankly, pointless. And my wife and I right now are talking about this. We might as well be homeschooling again like we did last year. It just makes no sense to be continuing to go through this. And then to top it off, now I'm taking my quarantine kids to school in my vehicle with me to drop off my non-quarantine kid because their bus got canceled. And I'm like, what sense does this make? What is really going on? They're sitting there on top of each other in the back seat of my truck, and I just kick one out and it's supposed to be all said and done. And I got to think that there's got to be an easy answer for some of these things. Like I said at the beginning of the meeting, as far as the transportation, I moved to Barrie about 4 years ago from up in Derby, and they had a bus shortage for about a week until they had volunteers from the school, teachers, administrators, whoever had already passed a background check, get paid as bus drivers for the morning and the afternoon, and they would just take over routes that, maybe they didn't have the regular bus driver for. They just subbed in. It seemed to work really well. We never had a missed bus again. And I lived there for, like 10 years. And I think we only had a bus shortage for about a week. So these are certain things to look into. And I mean, maybe another conversation as far as people on quarantining and people that got to go to work is maybe setting up something on a community page where parents can kind of step in and help each other out a little bit, because we can't really contact each other too easily for like across grades and stuff. I know I'd be willing to take in some quarantine kids and handle whatever I can handle, but we got to do better. I understand state guidelines is a guideline, but that's a baseline. We can do better. So that's all I got to say.
Thanks, Josh.
Sonia, you're muted by accident.
Oh, thank you so much, Lauren. Jackie, you're up next.
Okay. I got to click my buttons. It's the same question. I think Chris was about to answer it, but wouldn't testing prevent kids going home? And also, I know the state and the CDC recommends that, if you're vaccinated, you go home the next day. And I am pro-vax. We're going to get the kids as soon as they're old enough, but that makes no sense because they could potentially just bring it with. So why was testing discussed and not taken on for some reason? Is it a budget issue or is it something else? The old folks homes do it weekly.
I think Chris is going to answer your question, Jackie.
Okay. Is he allowed to?
Okay.
I'm going to do my best to address all of. That's why I thought it was important to hear from folks.
So we have public comment first, and then he's going to give his presentation, and I think he's probably going to address your question. But if anything else comes up, we will try to address that. Do you have another question that you would like to ask?
No, I just want to put a flag up. We're in Barrie Town, obviously, but we have to fill out pieces of paper. Hang on, honey. Thank you. We have to fill out pieces of paper that say my kid's not sick every time we show up. And I think we're just giving paper to people who then to teachers that have to deal with it. Like the kids that are coming, either the answer is no, because you see them, or the answer is no, and the parents are sending them anyway. So they're lying. Like that. Just 2 cents. Maybe we should stop with the papers. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jackie. And then Heidi.
Hi.
Hi.
I have she asked 2 questions that I had, wanted to know why there wasn't testing to stay in. The other one I have is that when I was going to bring my kids to get tested, I said, if she has no symptoms, and if she has no symptoms, what is the likelihood of her coming back positive? And they went on to tell me that if she was vaccinated, there's a very big possibility she could be carrying COVID and come back positive. But if she wasn't vaccinated, she'd come back negative. Why are we not testing both of the children? Why does one not have to be tested, but the other one does? And if somebody is, even though they're vaccinated and they could be carrying the virus and spreading it, why aren't they getting tested? They have the option to in 3 to 5 days, but they don't have to. Why is that?
I'm hoping Chris is going to answer that as well. Do you have any other questions or comments?
No, not right now.
Okay, thank you. All right, Chris, it looks like that's everybody. So I'm going to let you go ahead and hopefully answer all of these questions.
Yeah, I will certainly do my best. And folks, I really appreciate you sharing this. I want the board and anybody else listening in to know that the folks who've shared their experiences here tonight are a small fraction of the folks that we're hearing from in the community. And I cannot state enough the impact, the contact tracing in particular, but the rising cases of the Delta variant and COVID in our community is having on everybody, their family life, their work life, their kids' education. This is something that is absolutely heartbreaking, and there's no other way to put it. To Josh's point about, he has the opportunity to work from home. Many people do not. This is having impact on people's lives, on their ability to keep their jobs, and not to mention the constant worry and anxiety about their kids missing out on their education. I am, as a father, as a longtime educator, this has been incredibly difficult for all of us. Something that those of us on the leadership team, our teachers, our staff, you folks as board members, we've never experienced anything like this. So I just want to state that what these folks are sharing here is heartbreaking stuff, and it is a small portion of the community that is being impacted in very similar ways. So I'm going to try my best to address as many of these questions and concerns as I can. One thing that has come up from a number of folks is, what is different now? Why are we in this very, very tough spot when we had kiddos coming back in the spring? And just a little bit of, in the winter, a little bit of history here. And the year 2021 is only 9.5 months old, and to many of us it feels like a decade. But we are 9.5 months into the year 2021, and to remind folks, we had our pre-K through 6th graders return to in-person, full-time in-person instruction last January, after a pretty extended stay out for full-time remote learning for everybody, following a surge after the Halloween holiday last year. So our K to 6 kiddos came back full-time in January. And then after a spike in the region, or in the state, in February, things started to go down remarkably through the spring, to the point when we came back from April vacation. You will recall that we had our 7th and 8th graders come back to full-time in-person instruction for the last 7-8 weeks of the school year. The difference now, and why we were able to pull that off with everybody in school, I do want to let folks know we did have cases last year when we did that. We had cases, we had to do contact tracing, but it was largely manageable throughout, especially after the February break. We started to see light at the end of the tunnel. We were able to manage it and keep most kids in school. This went into the summer. All planning across the state and locally was for full-time in-person instruction. Looks like COVID-19 is on its way out. We had a few cases pop up in our summer program and in various summer programs around the state, which raised some red flags, but not in a 5-alarm fire way. When we came back to school in late August, early September, in short order, the Delta variant really began to hit this community very hard, and candidly, it hasn't stopped since. So for the first 8 weeks of school, we have been in a pretty much constant state and cycle of positive cases coming into the school for unvaccinated and vaccinated people, kiddos and adults. This has led to this incredible and relentless contact tracing process that folks are talking about here that is required by the state for us to do. I will candidly say, and I've said this in other community updates, I've said it to the Secretary of Education, to my colleagues around the state, that contact tracing is incredibly problematic. My worry, and it's shared by many of my colleagues, is that it is indeed counterproductive for many of the reasons people are talking about. Are we actually potentially doing more harm than good? A couple reasons for that. One, we're putting large numbers of kids, sometimes hundreds a day out of school, and the impact that's having on their education. But an equal worry that I have, and that we all have, and this has been brought up by some of the community members here, is our community's inability to truly quarantine. The whole point of having kids or anybody go into a quarantine situation is that they quarantine so that the virus isn't spread. The reality is, for a lot of families, that simply is not possible. Some of it, sure, is choice they're making. Maybe it's an unwillingness. But I want to point out, in fairness to communities everywhere, that work requirements, family obligations is making quarantining very, very challenging to do. So we're faced with this situation of rising cases in the area, and more kids having to be out. And our worry is that through this contact tracing and all these line lists we're having to share, that we might actually be making the problem worse. I don't know that. I can't speak to transmission, how it's happening, but it is certainly a worry in the back of our heads. This has been brought up. This dilemma has been brought up at the state level. When I'm talking about the current state of affairs, I want folks to know that our COVID coordinator, Jen Lyon, and I personally reached out to the secretary last week, Secretary French and his team, to let them know we are underwater here. Our community cannot withstand this. Our staff can't, our families can't, above all else, our kids can't. To his credit, he met with me and Jen, and we had what I thought was a very productive discussion. But he indicated he has his own concerns about contact tracing and that there are changes afoot. We were very optimistic about that, to keep more kids in school, more kids off that list while keeping everybody safe. But I found out today that the rising cases in Vermont, we're actually starting to surpass the positive rate of all the states in New England right now, is causing the state to walk back on that. That is concerning to me, but that's where we're at. I also want to speak to the test to stay proposal that's being promoted by the state of Vermont right now. This is something we desperately want to get behind as we understand it, but there are significant worries about it that I want people to know. The first is that if our staff is working on contact tracing, and I want folks to know this is a 24/7 proposition right now. Our staff, our COVID team, our principals, our nurses, other staff, it is just a constant all hands on deck situation. If we have to continue contact tracing, there simply will not be the capacity to do a test to stay for a community our size. I've made that clear to the secretary. Something is going to have to give. There is also worry around the state right now about the supply of the tests themselves. With the high numbers that we have, there's already worries of a shortage of these tests that would be needed. So there's just lots of questions that we have about it. I want to be as clear as I can that as a district, we are completely behind this concept. But what I don't want to do is overpromise to the community and say we're going to do something when we simply don't have the capacity to do it. Essentially, what it comes down to is if contact tracing stays as it is now and what we're required to do, test to stay is going to be, unless we have an army of folks from the agency come in to help us do it, and that is not going to happen. They don't have any staff either. it's just going to be challenging, if not impossible, for us to do. And it hurts me to say that, but I just want to be transparent and candid with folks. So we happen to be in a district where the case count is so high that it is made doing a lot of these proactive measures, surveillance testing, which the state is starting to walk back from now as an effective tool in schools anyway. It's just made it very challenging. So I just want to put that out there. I want to speak quickly to the bus situation as well, because this is actually related to COVID, of course, and the staffing shortages everywhere. To Sarah's point earlier, we contract our bus service to Student Transportation of America, STA. They employ our bus drivers. They hire them. It's important to note that bus drivers need to have a commercial driver's license with a school bus endorsement. Two of your administrators, myself and Mr. Kuhn, are former bus drivers. I believe Mr. Kuhn's, my endorsement has passed. I'd have to get it renewed, but it's not an easy process. And we can't just have volunteers drive buses from a liability standpoint. You have to have that endorsement. STA is struggling mightily to find people willing and able to drive buses, to go through the process with the state to get that endorsement. And that is kind of where we're at with the bus situation. I'm again, for full transparency, given what I'm hearing around the state and how other districts are really struggling with transportation right now. I just want to prepare our community that this may be the new reality for a while. Stacy Emerson, who is the coordinator at STA for us, is working at a heroic level. I am on the phone with this woman at 4 a.m. trying to coordinate this deep into the night. She's busting her tail to try to make sure we have drivers. It is just a huge struggle right now. To Jackie's point in the chat, about mobilizing the community, I forgot to mention about Test to Stay. I have had numerous parents, family members reach out to me volunteering to help with the Test to Stay. That is actually something we think could happen, but we would need a lot of people. And there's that supply issue. There's just a lot of questions that we have to have answered before we can put it in place. And this is not unique to Barrie. This is from what I understand, across the state. We're on board, we're signed up. My heart warms that the community is reaching out to me and to our principals to volunteer to do this. It says a lot about who we are. But the bus driving thing is much, much more complex. You can't just get in a bus and drive it. I drove a bus for years. It is not an easy gig, and the training required is with good reason. To Josh's point, yes, absolutely. The pay is great, the hours are kind of sketchy, but you can apply. You can go through the process of getting your license. Absolutely. Like everything else, Stacy is telling me that they're backed up at the state level to get people their tests, to get their endorsements. I mean, folks, you can't make this stuff up, but this is what we're dealing with. So we're looking at mid-November before those folks can get in there. Yeah, Josh, I always said Little League umpiring and driving a bus were the two hardest jobs I ever had. I may put those in number 2 and 3 now, but you can't just have anybody drive a bus. But a couple other pieces that I want to share about communication. I've heard from a number of parents about the almost relentless nature of having to update folks about these COVID cases. We are experimenting with switching to a weekly update for the Barrie City and Barrie Town schools. Basically, looking at the cases for the week where we currently stand. It is super important to me that we're transparent about the case counts in our school district. It was clear to me last week when we shared that community update with specific numbers, like real-time numbers, and they've been trickling in since, so they're going to be higher in my next update, that the numbers shared at the state level are incomplete or inaccurate. And I just think that is that's going to create more problems. All we can do is control how we're sharing our numbers. So I commit to you guys that we're going to really try to streamline the communication. We're looking at potentially having more of the communication come directly from the schools themselves as opposed to my office. It's a more, you get a little more personal touch from the teachers and the principals. We're looking at all kinds of things coming from a place, folks, of just extreme empathy for what everybody is going through. I remember talking to Marcy in the last Marcy Kreitz here when she came and shared her experience in person. I choked up. Talking to her. Hearing from everybody who was here, Heidi and Jackie. I haven't met you, but I so appreciate you coming. This is brutal, folks. But I just want you to know, to close here, we are. I'm advocating like a bulldog at the state level to get support and help to change these practices in ways that will help our kids and families. We are fighting hard. It may not feel like it, but this is a 24/7 gig for us right now, for the leadership of this school and all our teachers and everybody else, and we're fighting hard. So board, I welcome questions that you have. I hope I addressed most of this stuff. I answered what I can. I don't want to attempt to answer what I can't. So please let me know what you think.
Thanks, Chris. Heidi, your hand is raised, but unfortunately we are going to, we've done the community question part. If you have a question directly for Chris, I would recommend that you send him an email. Maybe he could put his email in the chat. That might be helpful. Gina, if you would like to go ahead, you're up next.
Yeah, Chris, I apologize. I had to miss the first part of that because I was dealing with a 4-year-old who just started pre-K this year. But I did want to give you the feedback that as someone who is now receiving both board and parent communications, I really appreciate the level of communication. I think one of the struggles of last year was that it felt like we didn't know anything until it had already happened. I always felt like I was behind in what was going on, and it was really frustrating. So I think it feels like a lot of communication because it is. I mean, there's a lot going on, but it's, critical that we have that. And it's critical, frankly, you need to tell families every single day, hey, we have 50 cases. Please keep your kids out of school when they're sick. People are in an impossible situation. I keep complaining to my mom and she says, people have to go to work. And I said, I know. I mean, we've all had kind of the rugs yanked out from underneath us in terms of backstop systems to help people make really tough decisions. And so I just wanted to, express some appreciation for the way you've been communicating around this.
Thanks, Gina. Renee?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up a little bit on some of the stuff that Chris was talking about. Chris and I worked together back close to 20 years ago at this point. So we've both, we've both been in education for a long time, and I have never, ever in public schools seen what I'm seeing right now. And I know that it's the same in basically every business right now, but I have never seen the shortages that I've seen, and I've never seen the amount of people trying to get provisional licenses and stuff just to help support their schools and the places that they love, and taking on jobs that they're, working their tails off to try to figure out how to do them just because it's so short. I've never, ever seen anything like this. And so I think that that's really important to remember as well, is that, I do believe that all schools are doing their very best to try to get people in, qualified people, to help support. And there really aren't words for it. It's nothing that I think any of us have ever seen before. And so I'm confident that Chris is open to trying to figure out any kind of ways to get the buses running, to get the kids in schools, to do all of those things. And so I just wanted to speak to that I'm truly baffled by what I've seen in the past 6 months.
Thanks, Renee. Abby?
I just really also want to take this moment to thank you, Chris, for everything you put into this for the communication. This has been a really difficult year. And I think you've been I appreciate your transparency around everything. And I hear that people are wanting to help. And I think that everybody in Barry is doing what they can. And this is something that needs to be, you need help in advocating for Barry and for the schools. And I think people need to direct their concerns back to the state and ask them to bring us help, bring us people in the form of people with CDLs, people who can help with the test to stay. Because I think we're getting in this horrible cycle of we have to send kids home for quarantine because that's what our guidelines and our structures are right now. And we're also undermining our own workforce. That's been happening. We're sending home our own workforce because they have to be home with the kids as well. And we're so stuck in this cycle. We need help breaking it. I don't know if that's much help, but I appreciate
we had 2 staff members share earlier. They've had to be home with their kids. Kristen Morrison shared she's been on 6 line lists.
Yeah.
So she has not been able to be at work as a result of that.
Yeah.
So these are, and Carrie, I believe who's a para at Barry Town, same thing. And so it's impacting staff in a huge way too.
Thanks, Abby. Renee?
I also just wanted to follow up because I know she's not going to say it, but we were at the regional school board meeting, and Abby Smith spoke very clearly to the Secretary of Education about the needs of our community and how challenging it's been and how we need support and how we need people there. And so I wanted to recognize her for that. I know Chris has been saying the same things to him. So I just want everybody who's on the call to know that your leaders are advocating for you. They're advocating for your kids, and they're trying to get state support the best that they can. And that, again, they have shortages too. And so it's just kind of this cyclical thing of there's not enough people anywhere. But Abby and Chris have been speaking for you guys very clearly. And I just wanted to make sure that people know that.
Thanks, Renee. Okay, so I don't have anything else for COVID update. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Chris, I have one question, and Renee and Abby alluded to it, and going to the VSBA regional meeting, are we in a super special zone where we have such large schools and we are sort of, because we were sort of had this exposure early to because of other events that happened outside of school, are we in a different situation, or are a lot of schools also going through this?
A lot of schools are going through this.
Okay.
I think to your point though, Sonia, we do have a bit of a double whammy in that there are high case counts in Barry and we have big schools. So it just has that bigger impact. But no, I was at a VSA training today for new superintendents. And guys, I mean, if you read the room, we're trying to talk about real superintendent things, curriculum and instruction, all those things. Everybody is focused on COVID. It's an all-consuming situation right now for schools. We may be in the upper reaches of who's getting hit the hardest, but we can take a little solace in knowing that we're not alone at all.
So I mean, I was trying to run through the things that have changed, but I think probably the thing that has changed is the biggest thing that has changed, and this is obviously very general and very obvious, but last year we were in a state of emergency and everyone was worried about COVID. This year, it seems like everybody's open back up and people need to be back at work and there's no social distancing and some people are vaccinated and some people are not, and small children are obviously not, and they weren't before and they're not now, but the rest of the world is acting like COVID is over and we are dealing with the fact that it is not. And so I think this is part of the issue the challenge that we're having, because people are expected to go back to work. There's no more, oh, you can work from home, or we're going to have a daycare, set up for you or something like that. And those supports have gone away, and the rest of the world has moved on, and the schools are at the crossroads of the actual reality of what's happening. So
we're living in two universes.
Yeah.
Our kids are in two universes, and
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. Gina?
And adding to that, Sonia, this really hit home for me today. There is no CARES FMLA. There is no CARES paid leave. There is nothing to cover people if they have to take time. And so I have an employee who's just about to lose a week and a half of work because he's home quarantining with his kid, and I can't pay him. I mean, I'm a union shop. I can't work outside of my contract. So that person is losing income for a week and a half. And most people can't do that and survive. And that's my real concern. And that's my real concern when it comes back to what Chris is saying all the time about people making decisions about sending their kids to school. It is an impossible thing to ask people to do, to stay home from school with their kids anymore and lose income. That's an impossible thing to ask, but it's a snowballing situation, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. I don't have a point beyond that. I think I really only realized today how significant it is that we have pulled that financial safety net from people. That's going to hit everybody very hard.
Yeah. Thanks, Gina. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate all of the questions, and I appreciate everything that everybody's trying to do. And I know that there's a lot happening in the chat, and I can't read that and follow hands. So I'm hoping that we can harness some of this really good energy and use it to help get us out of this really difficult position. Chris Parker?
Yeah, I just saw Diane Solomon bring up a COVID-specific issue that we have talked about before, and that is mandatory vaccines for staff. And I know we talked about that last board meeting, and I wondered, Chris, if you have any update on that.
Thank you for bringing that up. As a matter of fact, yes, I meant to mention that. So mandatory vaccines for staff. Carol Merrill and I had a very productive meeting with our BEA colleagues, and they are behind this. We are drafting up a memorandum of understanding to start getting that in play. I think I mentioned last time, because I know this was on the table, that they're coming from the state level soon enough. And we want to get ahead of it. And we anticipate that language being able to be ready by early next week. And the vast majority of the association supports that, just so we know. Thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so with that, I think we will move on to other business roundtable. And I know that's not the end of COVID. I'm sure we will hear about it again at our next meeting, because I'm sure there will be more updates and more information to share at that point and in between. So for other business in roundtable, I'm going to go through my list, which I had lost, and ask anybody who would like to just chime in, board members, for things that we did not discuss. So Guy?
Thanks, Sonia. I'm going to try to start on a positive note. I've been, following TA, and just want to thank Jamie Bingham, the sports editor for Times-Argus, for really highlighting our sports teams. They're doing really well, and it's really exciting to see kids having a good time doing extracurriculars, and it really makes my it takes away the pain from what I hear tonight. I also want to thank the staff and parents who are so struggling through this really, really, really hard time. I mean, I agree with what everyone has said. I've been on the school board for a long time, and I can't remember the last time I've seen something like this. And I hate to say it, but I'm not sure we're through it yet. And appreciate what Chris has done in terms of communicating with folks. And thank you for the people weighing in tonight on this discussion. and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Guy. Next up, Tim.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything at all tonight. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Tim. Alice.
I would just like to thank all the people who took the time to either listen and participate in our meeting here, and that this is not the end of it. We're still in business and we're still listening and we're still available.
Yes, thank you, Alice. Sarah?
I would echo what both Guy and Allison and have said. I know everybody is working as hard as possible under which seems like inconceivable circumstances, and I'd like to thank all of our staff and all the parents at home for being as understanding as possible.
Thanks, Sarah. Renee?
I think everybody already said what I was thinking.
Okay. Thanks, Renee. Gina?
I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Thanks, Gina. Chris Parker?
I want to thank all the administrators for coming to the meeting tonight, and everyone else who worked all day and then came to this meeting because it's important. We appreciate all of the participation and the interest. And also, I want to say, if folks are feeling like they are not getting the information about like listening sessions or board meetings or whatever, any of us can give information about where that stuff is posted. As a community member, a board member, and a parent, I am getting the same information about 5, 6, 7 different ways between email, Front Porch Forum, my personal email address, information from the high school where my twins go. So I feel like information is flowing very, very freely and frequently, and I'd be happy to let anybody know where they can find that information if they're finding that they are not getting what they hoped for as announcements for board meetings or listening sessions. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Abby?
I wanted to thank everybody who showed up, both admins and community members and parents, because it shows that at the end of the day, we really are all here for the kids, and everybody wants the kids back in school, learning, being successful. I saw a lot of comments and heard a lot of questions about, well, what can we do to help? We see that the community wants to help. So one of the things that you can definitely do is keep your kids home if they are sick at all for anything. Err on the side of caution all the time. I think the other thing you can do if you want to volunteer is you can sign up to go through the sub process to be available to help out in the schools. Even if it's just a few days a week, the bigger the sub pool that they have, the more options they're going to have. I think the other thing that we need to do is put our voices together, because we are clearly all in the same challenge together. Like, we all have the same end goal. We want our kids to be safe and healthy and successful in school. So we can put our voices together and amplify our message for help from anybody who will listen. Keep talking about it. Let people know that the struggles are here and that we are all trying as a community, because the only thing that's going to help is if people are hearing how much we're struggling, and we're not the only community. So we need to continue. Oh my gosh, sorry. Now I got tongue tied. To keep putting the message out that we need people, we need support, and honestly, we need to backtrack. We have all identified here that part of the challenge, like Sonia said, is that we are acting in a post-COVID world because a lot of it is for adults. But you know what? Our youngest population is not vaccinated. They're not in the same world as the adults are, and the adults that are making the choices don't see that. And we need to help them understand that our kids have to function in a different world than the adults because they have a different health situation right now. So we need to look at them differently. We need to have different options, but we don't have the people or the support to do that right now. So just keep speaking your truth, keep speaking your concern to everybody.
Thanks, Abby. I have nothing new to add. I do want to thank everybody for coming to the meeting and participating or listening, and either because of the listening session and discussion about the surplus or about the COVID update, and the situations that people are being impacted with personally, professionally. We hear you, Chris hears you. We are all doing our best to address the situation. And unfortunately, some things are out of our control. So we will keep doing our best. And I do appreciate that there are as many people here that have participated. I also want to thank the board because I appreciate that you were willing to do the listening session and you did listen. And I feel like we got a lot of good feedback, and I hope that that gives everybody some food for thought, and we can have a good discussion about how to move forward with a surplus at our next board meeting. So with that, Chris, I'm going to give you the last word. Do you have anything else you'd like to add for roundtable?
I think folks have heard enough from me. I'll just say thank you to the board, to all the community members, to any staff and administration who are here for just all your support in the most challenging time imaginable, right? So we're feeling that support and very grateful for it.
Okay, moving on to future agenda items. There are a number of agenda items that have been pushed to the end of October meeting. I do not think we will get to all of them because we pushed a lot of things to this meeting, and then with the listening session, we had to push it to the end of October. I don't think that's all going to happen, and we're going to add, we're going to keep, obviously, COVID update. We're going to have another discussion about surplus funds, and we're going to have to review the draft or adopt the draft of the official screening of the committee charge. I do want to put into the parking lot about the school finance ed funding formula at 101. I don't know who suggested that. And I also have on a future agenda item, this was before the meeting started, Ed Roos would like to come back at our next meeting and talk about the Spalding High School Foundation, because we need to appoint a board member to that foundation to be a liaison for us. So I have those things. Is there anything else that needs to be added as a future agenda item? All right. Yes, Andrea.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm, you want the SHS Foundation at the October meeting, the second one?
Yes.
Okay, but the other issue, and I didn't quite catch it fast enough, School Education Finance 101.
Yeah, that's just going to be a parking lot item. We're definitely not doing that in October.
Right, I just wanted to word it right. So it's School Education Financing 101?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Just a like a little 101 tutorial about school education finance. I mean, we could probably talk about that for a couple hours, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. There's no 101 when it comes to this.
No. But yeah, we'll just put that in the parking lot, and that might be a precursor to budget talks or a conversation maybe at another listening session when we talk about the budget. It might be good to kind of go through that. So I just wanted to in the parking lot so we don't forget. Carol, Merrill, do you have your hand up?
I do. I just wanted to remind you that at some point you're going to have to choose 2 board members to join the committee for the superintendent search.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Carol. Board members. Okay. The next, I'm going to warn the board right now, the next board agenda is going to be packed. And so make sure you eat your Wheaties in the morning and get in that extra nap between your day job and this job, because I'm going to try not to pack it too much, but it could be a longer one. So be prepared. You have been warned. I will push off as much as I can, but some things you will not be able to push off. So with that, the next meeting date is on October 28th at 5:30. It will be virtual again. And I believe we will have an in-person option at the central office. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, we can, but I will say, with the current situation, there's a lot of moves right to fully virtual for these meetings. I know some districts are trying to do them in person. I would suggest until further notice, we have them fully virtual to limit folks in the building. I just think it would be prudent.
No, I get that, but I think under statute, we have to have an in-person option because there's no state of emergency. And so the VSBA, I think, would tell us that we have to have an in-person option. I think we can encourage everybody to participate virtually, but I think we're supposed to have an in-person option.
I will be in person at the central office.
Okay.
So, Please don't come. No. You can tell it's late if I'm saying stuff like that. I think it was my dumb idea for the School Finance 101 too. My apologies. But no, I think we do want to encourage virtual meetings for now. But Sonia, I believe you are right. I will be there in person on the 28th for sure.
Okay. And I think that's just because that's what statute says. But we will really encourage everybody to participate virtually. All right, Andrea, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I just want to confirm, do you want at the October meeting, the second October meeting, to have the appointment of the 2 board members? Because I think that committee is going to start working.
Yeah, I would put it in there, and I'm going to work with Chris and Tina on that agenda. It's pretty heavy right now. I'll take a look. We'll see what we can shuffle around. Okay, and Renee.
So I just wanted to follow up on what is the process for next steps as far as everything that we've heard tonight and what we're going to be using the funds for. Where is that discussion going to happen? Is that at the next board meeting? Is that at the finance committee? So that any folks that are here, if they want to join, if it is at the committee level, or what we're going to be doing for next steps. So everybody, who's come and shared their ideas kind of have an idea of what's going to happen next.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think the finance committee is meeting between now and the next full board meeting. And I don't think that, I think it's probably best. The committee has made recommendations, and I think it's better if we just continue to move forward with having full board discussions. So we can put it on the agenda. We may not take any action as we have for the last few months. So we can have another discussion, and hopefully we'll put it as an action item if we can come to some resolution about some part of it. And if we can't, we will we'll continue to have the discussion. So, or we'll decide how we're going to move forward. So does that answer your question, Renee?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. All right. So as I said, the next meeting date is Thursday, October 28th. It will be virtual. I would encourage you to attend virtually. If you absolutely have no other way to attend, then you could go and sit with Chris, but you will have to be masked, and we would really encourage you not to do that, to attend in person. The next item on the agenda is executive session, but we have nothing for executive session tonight. And so I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thanks, Alice. And Sarah had her hand up. I'm going to give her the second. I'm assuming there's no discussion. All those in favor, please signify with a thumbs up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think I'm missing Guy. 7. The motion passes, and we are adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and we will see you all very soon. Thank you, Chris, for all of your work. We appreciate it.
Good night, everybody. Thank you. I'm stopping the recording, Andrea. I'll send it right away.
Chris, before you sign off, I just wanted to catch you for a second.
Right on.
Okay, good night, everyone.
I'm stopping the recording.